My name's Khali. I'm here with Mark Walsh, and this is one of our Tribe Naked podcasts. This is actually the first podcast that I'm like doing on my own, so I'm kind of a bit nervous and excited for that. So really, I want to just like spend some time talking to you, Mark, about some of your background, some of like your perspectives and passion about embodiment, and I want to connect that a little bit to just like what our orientation at Tribe is, you know, and in particular for us, you know, authenticity is really important. And what is it to like embody our authenticity? You know, I think in the centering world, that's quite often referred to as like center. So, you know, I'm curious to explore that a little bit, you know, and what is it to relate from a really embodied kind of place. So I'd like to, you know, bring some of those themes.
Yeah.
And, you know, a important orientation for us as well is to, communicate from a very relational kind of space, you know, so I'll look to kind of have that perspective, that style of communication here, so that we have a lot of presence and we're exploring what's happening in real time as well as the things that are around us and what we're exploring. Cool. How does that all sound?
Yeah, good. Let's do it, man.
Okay, sweet. So, you know, maybe you could just like share a little bit about you, just like how you got to where you are.
So the journey to what I do now?
Yeah.
Yes, I often say my journey really was one of failure. So the central failure of Western education, which is the privileging of the cognitive. So I was really bright, good at school, you know, good with books and good with exams. It all came very easily to me as a kid. And that got me so far. Cut a long story short, at 17, I found myself drug addicted, alcoholic, drug dealing, suicidal, sick, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And I thought, well, what the fuck has happened here? Like, if I'm so clever, why am I screwed up? You know? Mm-hmm. And I had this realization that there was more than one way to be smart. And so when I went to university to do psychology, I realized that, yeah, the sort of Western study of the mind was interesting, but there was much more to it. And I started doing martial arts and combining that with the psychology. And that combination really, I kind of started reinventing the field of what would now be called embodiment or somatics or body-mind psychology. There's a lot of crossover in those terms. And I just went, you know, this is what I love. This is what I really want to do. And I started exploring that first through the martial arts and then through dance and body therapy and body work and other different modalities that I found already existed, this kind of feast that's out there. Yeah, that was how I got into the field that I work in.
Yeah, imagine it's a pretty common story, you know, for people to be confronted by, you know, the places where life is hard, or, you know, I think generally about just like disembodiment, you know, and why that is, because that's what I'm hearing you speak to, you know, where you're very cognitive and disembodied. And I imagine a lot of that was probably because you had pain. You know, I think about trauma and how much pain.
In some ways, it's just symptomatic of the culture to be, you know, super cognitive, to think that you can get good at kissing by reading books on kissing, you know. There's that symptomatic of the culture, and then there's the personal pain on top of that. You know, I came from a family with a lot of mental ill health and addiction, and it was, I also worked quite a lot in war zones. So that was another, you know, trauma became a big interest to me, and a sort of further disembodiment on top of the common level average person in the street in Sydney or London disembodiment that can happen. Spent a lot of time working in Russia and Israel, which both have a lot of trauma. So that's become an interest of mine. So certainly I just see disembodiment across the board. I see it in business leaders who are just doing too much and are overwhelmed, you know. I see it in, you know, I've done some stuff in the attraction field, and it's not very sexy to be just, you know, head on a stick. You know, so I see it in all different fields of the applications of coming home to the body. The applications of getting your one's body back are profound and diverse.
Yeah, totally. There's lots of threads, bookmarks there, but, you know, what's most present for me at this point is I feel my own sense of care and passion for embodiment, you know, around healing trauma, you know, and how actually much trauma is like culturally has us disembodied, and And something I'm exploring quite a bit myself at the moment is my own trauma. I'm doing kind of codependence work, looking at some of my, relational dysfunction based on some of my early childhood trauma, and where it has me like disassociate and leave myself. And it's really confronting, but it's also really profound. And, this is a big part of my passion for embodiment. And I've heard you, bless you.
I'm allergic to Australians. Terribly sorry.
What? I think we need to test that out a little bit more.
No, I'm not actually. Actually, the Australians seem to take well to my style. I've been discovering my own podcast gets a lot of downloads from Australia, sort of disproportional. So there's some kind of a fit in terms of humor and robustness, I think.
Nice. Yeah. I like to think that Australians kind of like, they punch a little heavier than their weight. We're like, actually, there's not that many of us really, but you find Australians traveling all over the place, and there's like all the Australian rednecks too, which are like, I feel sad about. I just wanted to finish the thing I was saying. Like, I've heard you speak about this, actually, in a way, like this embodiment means we don't feel ourselves, and then it's way easier to inflict pain on other people, and be disconnected from what's happening in the planet, and I'd love to hear you speak to that.
That's the heart of it, and that's why I do what I do. That is the profound heart of this work. I noticed my voice change as soon as you talk about that, because it's like that's the middle of it for me, which is if we're disconnected from ourselves, which is disembodiment. That's all disembodiment means, being disconnected from ourselves in the moment and over a longer time frame. If we're disconnected from ourselves, we can't feel others. So empathy is an embodied capacity. So that social, that natural, ethical sense that we all have, that doing kind things feels good and doing mean things feels shitty. It's as simple as it's kind of like ethics, what I want for a 5-year-old. And then also in terms of like the environment we're in as well. We're not. I was looking at some buildings in London where I was teaching yesterday, and I was just thinking you could only work in there if you weren't feeling. And disconnection from the environment, of course, has profound environmental implications. So for me, those disconnects self, other. You could add spirit or something sacred in there, and nature, our own nature being the heart of nature. That's our gateway to nature, right? Our own nature, our own biology. People talk about nature as if it was something else, particularly in the Anglo world, where nature's that park you go to, but it's like, well, breathe, that's nature. So that disconnection is profound, and is essentially killing us as a species. So I think embodiment is one piece of the potential survival of the human race.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, amen, brother. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, so I'm kind of on this theme around trauma. I'm really curious to hear a bit more about your work in kind of war-torn areas, that you were mentioning before. Like, what was that like?
Yeah. 7:30 in the morning here. Good time. Let's fucking do it, man. Okay. Let's do it. Vietnam.
Feel free to go where you want to go as well.
It's good, man. It's all good. It's all good. Actually, around a lot of working in trauma, develop a certain sense of humor. You fucking have to.
Totally.
So, what we got? Let's start with the definition of trauma, because that word is like banded around. I'm not a therapist. I should say I have a degree in psychology, and I consider myself a trauma educator, but I'm not working clinically. So just to sort of place myself in terms of qualifications here, my main mentor, Paul Linden, works in abuse recovery. So he's someone that I've done a 10-year apprenticeship with. So I have a reasoned background. So trauma, what is trauma? It's not like something merely upsetting. It's not someone on an American college campus getting upset that Milo's coming to talk. That's not trauma, okay? So, or, you're out of chocolate. That's merely distressing. So trauma is when there's a sense of overwhelm, when something happens that usually in the DSM, the Diagnostical Statistical Manual, it's threat to life, limb, or integrity of self. Yeah, so the event is important, which is strange for psychological diagnostic criteria. But the key thing is this feeling of overwhelm. So it's not just fear, it's terror, for example. And when one's resources can't cope, what happens is people shut off, essentially. So the fight-flight response, fight, flight, freeze, fold more fully, which most people will have heard of, becomes essentially stuck in the system. And that might be for a day, for a few weeks. For example, after I was in a car crash once, I just felt like I'd had a lot of espresso for about 3 days and I couldn't sleep, And it was like, whoa, yeah. And then it gradually faded because a lot of acute trauma actually fades. But if it gets stuck in the system, we could at that point, for a few months start saying, okay, maybe this person has a clinical condition like post-traumatic stress disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. However, that's the sort of clinical way of defining it. However, most of us have little bits of trauma, as it were, because, bad things happen to most of us at some point in our lives.
Well, Charlie, let me just interject there, because I think, like one way of looking at trauma, I think, is just like how we've been abused, essentially, and there's like very severe cases of trauma, which I think you're kind of, is most often what trauma is defined around. But there's also a lot of very subtle abuse that we're, experience, kind of ways that it's not physical, but there's like subtle ways that we're denied our kind of emotional and thinking realities.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd classify that as trauma. So I think it's for the dignity of people who have, say, suffered a gang rape or been in a war.
For sure. Yeah.
There's kind of a liberal word creep where everythth becomes traumatic and triggering.
Totally.
I kind of want to reserve those words a little bit for some of the more, or else what are they left with? What are they left with?
Totally.
Yes, but I get that you could look at it in terms of just how the nervous system forms around things. Response. So the two major responses are the hyperarousal or the numbing. So the hyperarousal is, being stuck in that fast mode that we see in the modern world, which in some ways is, the modern world stuck in hyperarousal without the trauma. And the other one would be the numbing, the disembodiment, the lack of feeling. And just to bring in the cultural piece here, you said it's about the bad things that happen to us. It's also about the bad things that we do or our culture does. So in the case of, say, Britain and Australia, we are cultures founded on genocide. So I have an Irish side, which has perhaps been the victims of, the Irish potato famine, for example, was a genocide. It wasn't a famine. But it's also, British people have done horrible things, so have Australians. It's just part of our heritage. There's a certain numbing from the doing. Even drone pilots get this. So it's not just, drone pilots are a great example because it's a study done in the States, because they're not actually ever in danger, but they're doing the violence.
Yeah.
So it's that side of things, I think, is under acknowledged.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Well, my curiosity here is actually mostly about like just the story of like you working with people in those places.
Okay, yeah. So I was doing Aikido and a lot of martial arts, and I heard about this organization that was using Aikido for peace. And I thought, well, that's funny, like a martial art for peace, it's like fucking for virginity. I thought that's cool. So so I was like, let's go find out what's going on there. So I ended up getting involved in this project in Cyprus with a guy called Don Levine and Richard Strozzi Heckler, two sort of big people in that world. And they became mentors. And it was a peace project with the United Nations. It brought together people from warring countries. So there was Greeks and Turks, Israelis and Palestinians, Brits and Iraqis, Americans and fucking everyone, I usually joke. And all these people had come together and we're doing martial arts together, and we're using the body as a way to connect and bond and overcome some of that hatred that we've been taught. People sat down on the first day and they looked across the table and they were like, I've been taught my whole life to hate you. It's like, okay, wow. And using the body to overcome that. Some beautiful things came out of that, and I just kind of followed that thread, and I ended up working in the slums of Brazil, which was pretty full on. That was the head fuck, actually, because it was like I'd be like teaching kids in the favela, and then I'd be at like some exclusive party with my English clients. So I was teaching English for money, and I'd be dancing with some amazing, beautiful Brazilian girl, and then getting shot at. It's like that was a real head fuck. I was in Ethiopia, which was just dirt poor, and really underdeveloped. So that that was interesting. And the sort of dictator of Ethiopia knew my boss, and we weren't sure if he was going to kill us at any point. So that was fun. I was done a lot of work in Israel, Palestine. I was in Afghanistan. That was pretty heavy. And I met my wife in the Ukraine. So I was working with soldiers in the Ukraine.
Wow.
So basically I was given this beautiful interpreter to work with. It was a total setup because they had no money and they wanted me to keep coming back. So they were like, and Dario was like, I'm not sure why I've been given this job. I am not a professional interpreter, but I have lots in common with you, and I am single and very beautiful. I was just like, you can't bang your students, but colleagues are fine, right? So So that ended well for everyone. So so that was the Ukraine. So there's a few other countries. Sierra Leone with soldiers. That was pretty interesting.
Wow, what an amazing set of
So I had a few adventures. Basically, it's just interesting to me as well. You know, most of my work's with yoga teachers, life coaches, and in the corporate world. But for a long time, I'd go to sort of one place a year that would make my mum worry.
Well, what I'm really curious about here is like, was it Aikido that you were doing with these people? Like, what in particular were you doing with their body?
So Aikido was just the birth of embodied work for me. And then I realized like, what was important was not the throwing people around, but the reconnection to the body and some of this sort of core skills like centering or whatever that were within the Aikido practice. So any embodied art will get to embodiment through a different angle and through a slightly different skill set. And I expanded my skill set through other arts that are out there, like body therapy, body work, dance, etc. So embodied peace building involves a lot of like self-regulation practices. It's pretty difficult to have a good conversation if you're fired up. So you learn like nonviolent communication or, you know, relational practices, and that's all good. But if as soon as you see someone from the opposing team, you want to kill them and your heart's racing and you want to jump out of your chair, your chance of a good dialogue's fuck all. So like a lot of the self-regulation, there's some embodied listening practices. Combine it with more traditional verbal approaches. So there's a whole body of work on embodied peace building. He's making that Paul Linden invented and I kind of carried forward. There's another guy called David Weinstock who does good work in this area. So that's not the main part of what I do, but it's colorful, so people often ask about it.
Nice. Yeah. No, I think my last question in this kind of thread is I'm just curious, like how, you know, doing this work impacted you? Like how did it change you?
Fuck me up, Khali. No, I mean, I was just joking aside. There was definitely a point where I had to do my own trauma work because there's a lot of vicarious trauma, and particularly when I was younger and didn't know so much about trauma, and I was doing it in an unwise way and sort of picking up vicarious trauma. You know, like in Sierra Leone, I spent 2 weeks just listening to the most traumatized people you could ever meet, and I didn't do that. Didn't have an assistant. I didn't self-care properly. It's stuff that I just never do now. Would never even take that job now. I took it at a time, it was foolhardy. So there was a trauma impact. But then, I don't know, for me, a big one is purpose. That's something I coach a lot of people on, is life purpose. Because everyone wants to do something meaningful in their life, right? Like it's pretty, you know, people come to you and they're like, hey, I want to change my job or whatever. And I think something about being close to the sharp end of life. And I've always kind of felt like I had a gun to my head anyway, because of my family background, addiction background. But it certainly brings a passion and a gratitude and a sense of purpose. Like, I feel like it's really essential we all face our own death, whether that be literally, and you'll see people, particularly young men, just drawn to war for that reason. But also existentially, whether it's, you know, the death meditations or the sort of the ego death of kind of meditating very deeply or whatever it is. I feel like until we face death in one way or another, we're not going to live fully. So cliche, but for me, that was really hard, and it has impacted me that way. I feel like I burn with a certain intensity that's unusual for the average British bloke, and that's a big reason for that is this confrontation with mortality, my own through addiction and suicidal kind of impulses, and then later through war zones.
Yeah, and hearing that, I noticed myself like kind of become a bit more serious. I notice my attention goes into the core of my body a bit more, and it goes down, and there's like a sense of like perspective, you know, taking in what's important, you know. So
For me, seriousness is toxic to wisdom, so be careful with that, you know. Like it's anathema to me, seriousness. I refuse to take life seriously. It's for me,
it's always polarities, right? It's always polarities, you know. To me, there's like a place of seriousness where I'm like, actually, there's a sacredness, you know.
I think, you know, one of my Aikido teachers used to say, take what you do seriously, don't take yourself seriously. And I think that's a good way to hold this, you know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I'm a little bit aware of kind of the people who will be listening to this, and I realize we've gone through some like a little bit morbid topics so far, and following my curiosity, but I would like to shift it to like, you know, like how how embodiment actually makes our lives better as well, like.
Yeah. We haven't defined embodiment very well either.
Yeah, great. Let's talk about that a bit. What is embodiment for you?
Yeah, so how we are is the simplest definition. The manner of our being, the subjective experience of the body as verb, as process, not it, not self, rather the body as an aspect of self rather than object. There's like five definitions. A form of intelligence, which is embodied intelligence, would be another way to pass it. Body is more than a brain taxi, more than a piece of meat, would be another way of more poetically saying it. So more than mindfulness, more than just body awareness. So working with body as an aspect of who we are. Yeah, I think that's the key thing here. So it's, yes, body awareness is the base, but more than that, this aspect of like, hey, this body is a key part of me. And how
I just want to I want to go and pause you because you said a lot there, and there was a lot of really good stuff, and I just particularly this thing of like, I am a body, and I don't just have a body, body as this like living process, and I think it's so common that people like treat their body as this like thing, like I love your phrase, my body's not just a brain taxi.
That's Francis Fry's claim. I should say that.
Right.
Give him credit.
Yeah. And so then of course the body, as this living process, is so full of intelligence and wisdom, and kind of so much part of actually who we are, and kind of this much larger sense of what we're connected to.
Yeah, I mean, if the body is involved in everything because it's part of who we are, then it's, to come to the second part of your question, it's impactful for everything. So it's like, I mean, I do workshops on leadership, stress management, like tools for coaches, ways of deepening a yoga asana practice, and there's different applications, but it's almost like I can do any application because it's the body's always there. Like one of my friends says, wherever you go, there you are. Like you're always at the scene of the crime is how I put that. What's the one common factor in you and every shitty ex? It's you, right? So it's, you know what I mean? So it's like, what's the one common factor in you and every time your kids have kicked off? It's you. So like that is the basic when I'm working with geeks, I say like, this is the basic operating system. You need to become aware of how it functions and then have some choice. So it's awareness and choice. That's the key thing here. I'm not in a pathology model. So, I don't so much work with like traumatic symptoms, where it's more just like become aware of what you're doing and then choose to have some range, some possibility. And listeners now, they could look at how they're sitting or standing or walking and just ask themselves, like, was that a choice? And what is that a body for? So when we say body, I don't mean how tall you are, how athletic you are. That's the objective view of the body, which is fine, but it's different. It's that what's the way you're structuring yourself, the way you're moving, the way you're aware of yourself, the way you're breathing. What is that a body for right now? Like, is it a good body for listening, for example, if you're listening to a podcast? Or is it more of a, I don't know, maybe a skeptical body, which might be helpful too, but, be in choice about that.
Nice. Yeah, that's really interesting to me. I can imagine like, what's the body of a leader, or what's the body of like relaxation, like, so there's, to me, it speaks to this like way of being, so the body really just like represents our way of being in such a large way.
And super practical, right? Like if you say to someone like cognitively relax, they're like, well, how? Like, so embodiment is also a method, a lot of methodology. So like it's the how, the operational instruction. So it's like, what do you mean? So if someone says relax or be a good leader, like for example, what's a good leader? Okay, they have to be charismatic and kind and wise. Okay, how do you do that? And how do you do that in the moment? And then how do you build that a longer term as ontologically as a way of being? The two kind of time frames we can work with. So like, that's what I like about embodiment. It's like it's a shortcut. It's super practical. It's like, okay, confidence, get years of therapy on your inner issues, or you could just put your head up a bit. You could just walk with a slightly longer gait. There's ways to shift people's confidence in seconds, just through movement or posture. How do you relax? Breathe. It's like this stuff in many ways is, you can really fine tune it with expert knowledge, and there's lots of good systems.
But
you don't sort of need, like, you can just ask clients, like, what would that look like? Show me confidence. People get it.
Yeah, nice. Well, and this is totally what's really inspired me about embodiment work, and I've done a couple of courses with Stuart Heller, and like getting coached his stuff, like I started realizing that just like I had this kind of collapse going on in my chest.
Yeah.
I'm still there some of the time, and I just realized it was so connected to where I had like some low self-esteem issues, you know, and just like learning how to open up my chest and like stand taller, feel more of the kind of width of my body. It was just like so, it's such a big difference to how I was showing up. And, you know, I was working a lot in corporates at that point, and just like how, hey, I've lost the top of your head. If you can like tilt the camera
sorry,
up.
man, I just stood up. I often stand up when being interviewed. I don't like sitting down too long, so I'll often...
Yeah, fair enough. I just want to be able to see you. That's all.
Yeah, that's cool, man. It's funny being an embodiment teacher and sitting down all day. So I do a lot of podcasts and I interview people, and I like to kind of stand up and stretch and move around while I'm
Nice. Yeah. So I'd actually love you, before we started recording, you mentioned kind of the embodiment of attraction. So I'd love to hear how you like, you know, what the embodiment of attraction looks like for you, and we can like use that as one example of like fleshing out these practical applications.
This one's going deep into the ears of all the ladies out there. Sorry, that's my cheesy attraction coach voice. So, I mean, this is common sense, right? There's layers to this, right? But think about it. Which is more attractive, a man or a woman, or a dolphin, whatever the fuck you're into, a man or a woman, in their body, feeling themselves, feeling their emotions, vibrant, expressive, and alive, or the head on the stick, which is more attractive?
Yes.
You know, like that's a no-brainer. It's, you know, I was in Hungary recently, and I was watching this girl dance around the campfire, and Hungarians kind of have this slightly like earthy pagan feel. It's a little bit more in the hips than say like most Slavic East Europeans. They're a different heritage, something quite old about it. And she was a sort of, you know, what most people would say like a pretty average looking girl, kind of short. She didn't have much boobs. Face was nothing to, should never be a model. I don't want to be cruel to her, but let's put it that way. But she was dancing with such life and such vibrancy. It was almost just like the scent was coming off her as she kind of wafted by. And I looked at her, and every man around that campfire would like wanted to fuck her at that point, you know? And it was the most basic primal thing. Or it can be much more subtle than that. It could just be, I don't know, a guy walks in a room and he has that kind of quiet strength that many women love. Like his feet are on the ground, he's breathing deeply, he's secure in his own body. And then he speaks and he's like, hey, and he doesn't need to fucking say anything. I've tested this. I actually I did an experiment one year. I went up to well over 1,000 women in 8 different countries and just said hello. Wow. Yeah, so I spent a year doing this. I just basically went up to people and said, hi, you look nice, I want to talk to you. So no kind of crazy chat up line or weird, creepy NLP. It was just like, hi, I want to speak to you, you look nice. And what I noticed doing that is that the women responded in less than a second with their bodies instinctively. Now, if I was on purpose, you know, I'd just come from yoga, say I was really in myself, the percentage of women who would stop was near 100%. And if I was lacking confidence or authenticity or warmth, there's several factors here in embodiment that are important for attraction. There's a number of factors, and polarity is a big deal too. So it also depends on her embodiment. If I was lacking some of those factors, then they just either just wouldn't stop or would just stop and look at me like, who the fuck are you? You know, like we've actually, like children, dogs and women being chatted up definitely have this intuitive sense of embodiment. Like a dog will know who's the boss. You know, a woman will make an instantaneous call as to whether you're a high quality man who she wants to spend some time with. And I thoroughly field tested that across multiple cultures. So it's a very interesting phenomena. And I've also just noticed how much more attractive people get. Like if you go to say a yoga conference and everyone comes from London on day 1, they're like, hello, I'm a London person. And you know, by day 3, they're like, yeah, I'm the body and open. And it's like by day 3, it's like, where did all these hot people come from? You know? And of course, the people are the same. They've just got more relaxed and open, which, you know, is a guy I find attractive. Does that give you a bit of an in there? I mean, is that this kind of stuff?
Totally. Well, there's a few really interesting things to me in what you're saying. Like one is, like what I'm hearing between what you're saying is like, it can actually look very different depending on who the person is, right? So there's all types of different kind of embodiments of what could be attractive, but probably the key theme really in their bodies, they're relaxed in themselves, you know, and that they're, you know, then they're probably in the kind of alive expression of themselves, Yeah, so there isn't
Yes,
kind of that tightness.
the universal things and some typological things. So, for example, health. You know, very few people would find someone with leprosy attractive, right? Like there's the health. I call that just the base, being relatively healthy, and then there's vibrancy and expression, which is attractive across the board. Though culturally will look different. You know, it'd be more subtle in Japan than Australia, for example. And then there's presence, which is attractive across the board. Yeah, and then there's confidence, which is attractive pretty much across the board. But then we have polarity. So there's different ways to be sexy, right? Authenticity, which is attractive across the board. Like there are some universals, like people want to say beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Kind of. Yeah, like there are definitely, like me and my friend Tessify from Ethiopia went to a dance in Ethiopia and we said, who are the most attractive women here? And we picked out the same 3 women in a dance. We were from massively different cultural backgrounds. He has different cultural norms around attraction, but it would be like, okay, there's something about her and her. Yeah.
Yes.
And some of that is just physical, but a lot of it is more than that. This is the good news. If you're like short like me, or you've got a wonky nose or whatever, you know, it's like you can hit way above your weight with this stuff.
Yes.
Like every day I wake up, I look at my wife and I go, seriously, really? How did you blag that, man? Like
nice. High five.
Yeah, high five, self five. And my wife sometimes teaches this with me. There's some videos online, and we got with some embodied attraction videos that are out there. You know, she gives her sort of female point of view and East European point of view on this. So there's some universals, but then there's polarity, and I've worked a lot with the gay community, particularly in Russia, and I live in the kind of gay capital of the UK. And in the gay community, it's even more obvious. You know, the stereotypes in the gay community, like the butch and the femme, you know, and stuff like that. But there's real truth in that, because it's like, you know, it's like, you know, as one of my gay friends in Moscow said to me, Mark, darling, one of us has to go on top, you know? Like, they're like the polarity is not biologically determined. That's how it's established. So this is where the typological thing comes in. Like, you know, as quite a yang guy, and a heterosexual guy, I tend to prefer more yin women. So I'm a bee, I like flowers, would be the analogy. But if I was a more yin guy, which is valid, less common, but totally valid, you know, this is 2018, I would perhaps prefer a more yang woman. Incidentally, Australian women are some of the most yang in the world that I've come across.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Maybe it's just the ones I've met abroad, so I haven't been there yet, but that's quite an interesting issue in Australia, actually, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, that's super interesting. Well, why do you...
Holland and Sweden have also got quite yang women.
Do you have any like read on why you think that is?
I don't know. I haven't been there yet. Haven't worked it out. But you know, I think it's generally quite a yang culture. Australians are not noted for their sensitivity and subtlety, and you know, like Israel, for example, you know, it's quite a yang culture compared to Hawaii, like a yin culture. So I feel like there's just a general cultural factor there. Maybe it's just something to do with the history. I don't know. But I generally find, I mean, not all, some people might be out there, oh, it's generalizing, how awful. Which would be a very yang thing to do, by the way, if you're listening and thinking of it. But how dare he? But yeah, so I find that quite interesting about Australia. I'm keen to sort of figure that out when I'm there, actually.
Nice. Okay, as a bookmark there. Let's check in on that when you're actually here. Yeah. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit. I don't want to. Okay, so you know, like I said at the beginning, you know, one of the things we're about in Tribe is quite relational, and you know, one of the ways to do that is to bring conversations into the movement. So on that theme, I want to just ask you, like, how has this been for you so far? What's this conversation?
It's been fun. I feel like, especially for this early in the morning, I'm expressing myself in a way that I enjoy. You're obviously a good listener, which helps. I feel like we're covering some fun topics. But I know I feel good about it, so I feel warm.
Nice, cool. Yeah, I feel happy to be like exploring topics that I feel passionate about. I feel happy to be connecting with you, someone that I feel a lot of respect for, and I you know, have learned quite a bit from you, just like from afar, and so that feels really good to me, and exciting to me that we're actually doing this. So, and I'm appreciating your kind of joviality and your humor and lightheartedness, and your kind of, you know, you just roam along, and wherever we go, we end up going, and I'm enjoying that. It's like an ease to it. So I'm really appreciating that. Yeah.
Cool. I know it's a bit of anxiety when you start talking about relational stuff, and I think, part of me is like, oh, is this going to be like some eye gazing hippie thing now? like I'm not like super relational as a person, though obviously that's a huge part of my life. So I'm kind of like, part of me is a little bit like, okay, how's this going to go down?
Oh, that's funny. Well, so I'm curious about that. Like, how do you, like, to me, embodiment is like a super important piece of being relational, because there's so much communication that goes on a very embodied level,
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, how, how you feel a little bit of kind of, anxiousness there, and you just have such a passion for embodiment.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. First of all, that embodiment, as we become embodied, it opens up the possibility for real connection and relationship and authenticity, which is the basis of trust and connection, right?
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that 100%. Like, if I don't know what I'm feeling, I can't tell you how I'm feeling, and I can't feel you, right? So like I totally get this is the massive relational piece and embodiment. I think that's actually underdone in a lot of the American teachers, because it's a hyper individualistic culture, and they tend to see things more individualistically than relationally and culturally. And we always have relational and cultural layers of embodiment. Like, you're right now, you're embodied in relation to me because you have a certain view of me and you've been listening to my stuff, and you'd be different with your partner or your best mate or your mum, right? It's going to be a different embodiment. So I'd really recognize that. The other thing I think is partly typological. I think some of us are just less relational, and that's okay. Like, there's a way in which the kind of personal growth world is sort of really into relationship, and there's a think of it in terms of like sameness and difference, or merging and differentiation. Like, both, that's the yin and yang. They're both part of life, but a lot, because mainstream world's a little isolating and isolated. A lot of alternative cultures, a little bit about the gooey merging and the coming together, sort of yin feminine principle, which is beautiful, but can also be overdone.
Totally.
You come across that in sort of more alternative, I don't know if Byron Bay's like that, but Brighton certainly can be.
For sure.
Yeah, I haven't been there yet, but I've heard things, so it's I mean, most countries have a place like that, but so there's some reluctance to sort of just say relational is what matters, and I could justify that. For me, I'm more of a doer. And even though our culture's sick in its excessive doing, I think it's okay to be typologically a doer.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah, well, that's what it has been present to is some of the values that we hold at Tribe in the form of relational work that we're teaching. Like, boundaries is super important for us to be teaching, as well as differentiation. So including those things, and what is it to actually be able to say no effectively, and to to share the stuff that people tend to see as kind of maybe less acceptable in the kind of more flowy cultures, where we like say the things we don't like about each other, and there's a way of doing that with respect and so on. But
here's an example. Like, I dance 5 rhythms, which I really enjoy, kind of nice body practice. At the end, there's a sharing circle, and everyone says, "Oh, I'm so grateful," and it's very breathy. And I never hear anyone sort of get real and say, "You know what? Fuck all you guys. You all look like wankers. I'm pissed off." You know what I mean? Like, but that's
I would love that. That would be the best.
Like why not? Or like with the eye gazing and stuff. It's like, stop making eye contact with me. It's intrusive. You fucking weirdo. Like, boundaries are really important. I don't want to get naked with everyone. I don't want to eye gaze with everyone. Like,
I'm a bit guilty of that for sure.
My wife, my best friends, but like I feel like that swing to them. So it's nice to hear you guys, big on boundaries, and I feel like we need to be differentiated before we can actually connect anyway, or else end up codependent.
Exactly. That's exactly right. The codependence work is informing a lot of what we're doing, as well as developmental work, particularly into more self-authorship, which is about internal locus of control. We have kind of more differentiation. We don't care so much what other people think, so on and so on. So that's super important. I want to summarize a little bit of a conversation. Then I want to go a bit more into the courses that you're teaching here, and just like some of the
let's sell some shit.
Let's sell some shit. Totally.
There's a major shadow that has all sorts of embodied components. That's one of the big taboos in alternative culture, is talking about money. On my podcast, I interviewed 120 guests. Only one of them talked about money, which I thought was fascinating.
Wow. Would you maybe just briefly touch on that? I feel super curious about that.
I don't know how it is in Australia, but in Britain, people have this reluctance to sell. And there's also this kind of seems crass. Maybe you guys are a bit more American with that. I don't know. and there's also this like narrative of like good people aren't rich, rich people aren't good. So it's noble to be poor. It's a kind of Nietzsche would sort of say this is like compensatory slave morality. And it's, I mean, most people have some issues around money, and those aren't just, there's a lot of good work out there on money stories and money narratives, but they're also embodied. Like, is there a sense of scarcity in your body, which is a real thing? Like, my wife's from Ukraine, she has that, but it's like, you know, her grandmother survived 3 famines, you know, like it's like reasons for that scarcity in her system, even though she grew up rich, she has plenty of money, you know. So it's in her system, a scarcity, or is it like grasping, or is it like lack of boundaries? Or, you know, I have a lot of clients that have trouble asking for stuff. Like there's something about self-esteem and valuing what they do. And again, these are deep embodied patterns to be able to give and be generous, to be able to receive and to be able to, we have 3 embodied yoga principles postures for this: giving, receiving, and containing. And most people are fucked up in one of these. So I'm pretty good at giving and receiving, but I find like organizing and containing money difficult. So I'm like, oops, I ran out of money again. I have to go make some more. And then, you know, but I put people in charge of that in my company to help me, because I know that's my weak point.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I just like, you know, I've certainly got things to work on there, you know, and we're in this early phase of business building, you know, and even you just talking about it, I noticed some like tightness just above my belly button, and there's like a tiny bit of like a shrinking sensation, and I'm just like a little tiny bit of feeling awkward, and I'm aware of the places where I do feel like awkward, like, you know, asking for money. And
put that out to listeners, just say the word money in your first language a few times, and just notice what happens in your body. Like when you say the word, I don't know, what do I really like? Love. You know, it's my wife's name or my niece's name, you know, I say Jessica. Can I say money with the same openness, relaxation, expansiveness? Like, if not, and even there's still work to be done. And there's still work to be done, you know, for me, but pretty much everyone I know has some money issues.
Yep. Oh, I'm gonna practice that. Thank you.
Simple body practice. Say money.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your courses. So there's 2 one days you're doing in Sydney, and I believe you've got some other things in Australia. One of the days is about embodied yoga principles, and the other one is a embodiment for facilitation and coaching. So, you know, maybe you can just talk about those one at a time.
Well, first time in Australia, so that's exciting, because I grew up, you know, watching Neighbours, and I've got Australian cousins, and, you know, obviously every time you go to a bar in England, you meet Australians. So I'm like, where are all these fuckers coming from? So I thought I'd go check it out. We get loads of podcast downloads. Nice. It seems like there's some sort of fit. So I'm basically on sabbatical, but I'm on sabbatical in Australia. I've never been there before, and I've started getting a few emails saying, hey, can you come and teach? So I'm passing through Byron Bay. I'm doing a embodied yoga teacher training in Melbourne. I'm doing the 2 days with you. So the main groups I teach are trainers and coaches, and we're going to do a day for trainers and coaches where they're going to get some really practical tools for working with the body. So if you're a facilitator, if you're a therapist, you know, whatever you call yourself, if you work with people and you're like, look, I know the body matters, but I'm not like a super martial arts expert or something. And I just want some practical stuff that I can use with clients to help them make shifts. That's a great little day. I've taught that day in about 30 countries. It's always slightly different, but it's very finely tuned in terms of like making sure people have practical shit they can walk away with. And there's a big self-awareness piece in there. The other people that can come to that are like body people who want to work in more mainstream environments. So one thing I've got pretty good at in running my company is how you take this good hippie body stuff and how you actually take that into, say, business or police or military or government, or even your at-risk youth, like mainstream environments where you can't wear a tie-dyed top and talk about your crystals and chakras. So if you want to like translate all your body knowledge, you're like a dancer or a yoga person or a martial artist, into those sort of environments, then definitely come as well. So it's where those 2 groups meet is where I've been playing, and we'll be doing that for a while. So that's the coach trainers day. Yeah, and
I'd love to see more body work, you know, out in the business world and more generally, you know, just like as we started, you know, I think it's just like actually important for larger world healing. Yeah.
Well, business runs the world, so unless they get their bodies back, they're going to get their souls back. And, you know, just practically stress management, leadership, communication, and then the profound ethical shift we've been talking about. So for me, aside from the fact that it pays well, that's another reason to work in business.
Really?
So
Yeah.
and then the yoga one.
Yep.
So I've done yoga for 20 years. Yoga asana is a beautiful thing. And it can just be sort of stretching, yeah, or it can be like an esoteric kind of pursuit. And I've really been within the question of how do we make yoga most impactful for our lives? So how do we use yoga postures to learn about ourselves as people and to get it off the mat into our life? So that's what this embodied yoga principles work is all about. I'm doing one day there, then the TT in Melbourne. Like that for me is a way of really enriching yoga practice. And generally it's people that already do yoga that come to that and they want to kind of add a layer to it. So it's not a style. So, you know, it can be added to Ashtanga or Yin or Hatha or whatever, integrated. And sometimes also coaches come to that because it's not very athletic what I'm teaching. And it's a really good little set of tools. Like if you're a coach and you want to give someone a homework on, say, money that we're just talking about, you can give them like, this is a tool to help you receive money. This is a posture for letting go at the end of the day. This is a posture for confidence. This is a posture for attraction. And it's really concrete, that work. So people, like in Russia, for example, they love it because it's really like these set postures people can use. And you can pick up a lot in a short space of time because they've been really finely tuned.
Yeah. I love how you're like using a practice that's just like so popular and just like growing and growing, and then adding this like psychological perspective, you know, and how, you know, because of course, like how we show up in our bodies is like how we're going to show up everywhere in life. Like you were saying, you know, there, you know, wherever I go, there I am. So like, you know, doing a yoga posture and then being able to notice the subtleties of each different person and the embodiment they bring to that posture and what that says about them. Like that's, I think it's a beautifully kind of great marketing thing you've done there, as well as a you know, kind of powerful place to really help.
Yeah, to me, the yoga seemed like the place to work because it was already common and in society it was accessible. Like people get yoga. It's not a big deal anymore to do yoga in most of the world now. So it just struck me as the tools were already there, the accessibility was there. So I sort of shifted some of the stuff I was doing. And, you know, yoga teachers are great because they already have a sense of the body. It's different. They're like a business person I work with who's like, oh shit, I have a body. Like my yoga teachers already get the body. And I just add some tools, and it's, you know, someone said it was a Western but deep approach to yoga, which I liked. So it's not the body beautiful yoga. It's not the esoteric yoga, though, you know, both of those have value. It's a Western but deep approach. And, you know, you see this anyway in yoga. If someone's doing warrior pose, you can see their personality, you know. All I'm doing is making that explicit and then giving them a way to develop themselves.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so we've put the yoga workshop, so each workshop is a day, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we put the yoga one on the first day and the coaches one on the second day. And we're encouraging people to come to both because I think it's like probably a nice way, you know, to come in and do the yoga and see how like a particular format of working with the body helps reveal things about people. And then going more kind of explicitly into facilitation and coaching with the body, you know, and how people might want to, you know, do that in their own way, probably not necessarily with yoga, but kind of, you know, whatever the context is. So I imagine they kind of go pretty nicely together. And then also Triibe is putting on our kind of intro event called Triibe Connect, which is like a authentic social style event, you know, which is then a place to you know, drop into kind of connection with each other and practice kind of the embodiment of connection and authenticity. So really encourage people to come to that Friday as well, and that's included as part of the tickets that we're of the days that we've got happening with you.
Great. I'm going to be doing some tourist shit the day before. So if anyone wants to hang out and just have a coffee, I can do that on the 13th. It says in my diary, tourist crap on the 13th. And then on 16th, I think I'm leaving later on to go to Brisbane, Gold Coast, Byron, and then to Melbourne the next weekend. So if you're in Australia somewhere else, if you can catch us in Sydney, great. And the two things definitely fit together. So one's kind of very concrete, one's much more general kind of principles and underlying kind of principles towards it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to being there for the first time. It's exciting. I'm supposed to be on sabbatical, so it's a little bit cheeky that I'm doing some workshops. So we're gonna have to tell my wife that I'm off somewhere else, okay? Because I'm supposed to be on holiday, but I can't. When I got on, I couldn't help myself teach a couple of cheeky workshops. So I think another one in New Zealand as well. Mostly I'm on holiday though. Mostly I'm on holiday.
Well, you guys can come and hang out with us, and we'll just like fully chill out and go social and holiday mode. Like,
I heard you have great food there as well. Is that right? Like, I'm a big eater. Like, eating is my second favorite thing. So it's like I heard you have great food in Sydney. Is that the case?
Totally. There's lots of good food. I love the diversity of food that's here, actually. Yeah, it's really good. So good. So just let's kind of move towards wrapping up. I really appreciated the range of things that we've covered on this call. You know, we started off and kind of looked at kind of your history,
death, sex, yoga,
money. Like, I think we've touched on all the big ones.
Yeah, I need a rest.
Marriage, briefly. So I really appreciate that, and that's part of, you know, what kind of, you know, Tribe is part of our ethos is about just like including it all, you know, including all the diversity of it, you know, which can get paradoxical because how do we include exclusion as well? How do we include boundaries and saying no? So, but I to me, this kind of the roaming exploration we had today was like a nice kind of representation of that ethos. So
I had fun, man. The time's gone by. I felt it was flowing. It was vibrant. It's nice to start building some relationship with you ahead of coming there as well.
Yeah, so, likewise.
You know, this was worth getting up in the morning for.
I'm so glad.
I felt like if I'm going to get up at 7:30, it's going to be fucking fun. I'll tell you that. So I had a good time.
Good.
I hope it was useful for people as well. That's the main thing. You know, I just want to be of service with this stuff. So I hope this was useful. There's loads of out there on embodiment. You know, there's ebooks that you can buy, free ones online. YouTube, my own podcast, you know, the embodiment podcast, is just shit. I've really tried to make this stuff available to the world free of charge. So even though I have courses that, you know, cost money, there's loads of content online. Like,
you're prolific. I can't believe how many videos you've got. You've got so many YouTube videos. It's like nuts.
Well over 1,000. You could spend like a week just watching YouTube videos to make this workshop. So that's what you've been doing, right? Thank you, man. You've been sitting on the other side of the world studying my stuff for years, right? So it's
that's right. And you send out this email like, I want to hear from you wherever you are. I'm like, okay. And here we are.
I love the internet. I love the modern world, how you can make stuff scale. Like we do online courses, you can scale stuff. You can put stuff out there for free. You know, I feel like there is a kind of karma that comes back without getting too hippie about it. You know, I do get rights based on someone did it 3 years ago or whatever. So it's cool, man. It's a nice feeling when you go, okay, I've given something out that has value and that's coming back to me now.
Yes, totally. Well, I for one am grateful, and I imagine other people will.
Oh shit! I'm just seeing the time, man. I need to go. I'm having a meeting with my colleague up a hill. We're going to go walking together to have a walking meeting. I need to run.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and be in touch real soon.
Cheers, man. A real pleasure.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mark. Bye, mate.